was English. He makes it a habit of not coming. He just doesn't show up at the Shuring Following English. I have to note it down whether he can go or not. No, I'm serious. I mean, why should some people be in the Koyva and other people not? You know, what's the story? He just does what he just doesn't come.
Today is Chaf Daled, the Thomas, the Tachin Sonic Test. This is Shir Klali with Rav Gavni, Parshas Matos Maaseh.
What's his name? The Iceland or Nossi, who is it? So note him down. Right, so we're turning in Parsha Maaseh, the second of the two Parshas, at chapter Lamed Daled. What's your story? Where are you coming from now? Huh? Well, we called out that the shiur was going to be early tonight.
Sorry.
I don't know, you guys get up to something. It's the same with the shiur and the Moshiach. You come at the end for the Mazanis. What do you do? What do you guys get up to? What do you do during this time? So clear answer. Okay, so we're learning in Parsha Matos, chapter Lamed Gimel. And it's Pasik Nun Beis, Nun Aleph and Nun Beis. I have to note down these guys that they came late. I'm serious about it. All right, Parsha Maaseh. Listen, we do everything for you guys. We've mamish giving you the best opportunities, the best in your name. You just can't be a mensch and come to the shiur on time. I don't understand. Just beyond my understanding. And we put in so much money. I mean, you realize how much this trip is costing? Mamish, thousands of dollars. Keep shooting. And just a little bit of decency, a little bit of menschlichkeit. I was at my boy, what's his name? Mechor, what's with him? I can't see him, he's behind, you're making yourself a Matthias there. You know the famous story with Tzemach Tzedek? You guys heard the story? The big rov came to the Tzemach Tzedek and Yom Noraim, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. And it was a tremendous shtupanif, tremendous pushing around. And in those days there were thousands of tziddim. And he got pushed all over the place. So when he got into a personal interview with the Rebbe of the Tzemach Tzedek, he said, what sort of, you need to teach these guys, sort of, derech eretz, Everywhere I was, I got pushed. So the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, who told you that you have to make your Matthias so big? That your Matthias was kilo all over the base of Medrash, so wherever you were being pushed. You see what the answer is? I don't know if any of you guys understood that, but anyway. As a matter, it comes to us that the fact that I couldn't see him because of your Matthias, you have to do a bit of cheshbon and nefesh about your Matthias. So, it's well known, the Teres of Baal Shem Tov, or the Baal Shem Tov, said that the 40, what do we need the 42 journeys that the Yidden made on the going out of Egypt all the way through the desert until they came to Eretz Teva Rechova, to Eretz Yisrael. What do we need to be told? All the 42 journeys. And so Rashi goes into that. Rashi says, without being nicknamed as there, it's not really the theme of the class. And the Baal Shem Tov answered that every individual, every Yid, from the time that the Yidden left Mitzrayim until Mashiach will come, and maybe even after Mashiach will come, that every Yid has to go through during his life all of those 42 journeys. That there's like they become the basis and the yesod of the life of a Yid. That a Yid is a noseya. How do you call it? He's a traveler and a mover. He doesn't sit in one place. And there's the famous old Chassidish quip has it that he's not a portrait. A portrait is in Yiddish a picture that hangs in the wall, a portrait, a painting of somebody. And so a portrait is always the same. Whenever you look at it, it's always exactly the same. There's an old saying that a chassid is not a portrait, that he's always moving, he's always going, he's always progressing further and further, isn't he? Isn't he, your sister? Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's a mirror. The Indian of the 42 journeys, they are 42 passages and events that go, that everybody in every Yid in his life moves, if he's only interested in carrying out the Ratzon of the Eibishter, that he moves higher and higher from journey to journey until he reaches Eretz Yisrael. But that's not that he has to go up to Gan Eden after Me'ah V'Yesrim Shona, but he goes into the eternal life with Moshiach taken from Miyad Mamish. One of the dugmas lezeh is that the famous Kabbalah Sefer, what he ties it, the Rizal brings it down, it's brought down in the Kisvei Rizal, that he ties it, one of the places that they left is called Kivrei Satavo. Why is it called Kivrei Satavo? Because that's where all the people wanted to slave, and they had a taiva for meat. And the Eibusha gave them the meat, but it unfortunately wasn't to their benefit. They all passed away on the spot. The whole Rikas when Pasha Bahal Ishcha. And so they called that place Kivrei Satavo, the burial place of lust. And so it's written in a Pasuk, why Shisham Kovru Ha'am Hamisavim. That's where they buried the people who fell into the taiva for meat. So said the Arizal in the name of this Sefer, that Kivrei Satavo means the Indian from Chokmah Elokitz. That they call divine wisdom that you gain through learning Torah and struggling in Torah, B'Pratim Pnimis HaTorah, that you bury all of your taivas. Kivrei Satavo, that you have no taiva anymore, and you bury it altogether. As they say in Yiddish, tief in der Erd, deep in the ground. You bury all the taivas. And so it's written that they traveled Mikivrei Satavo. So the Rizal said that was one step that you got to make, plus all the other 42 represent similar inyanim in the life of a Yid, that he goes from step to step towards Mashiach Tzidkenu taken from Miyad Mami. So we see that after they've told the whole 42 journeys of the Yidden, and they reached the Indian of Arvish Moyav, or that's the fields of Moyav, immediately opposite Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, and they were on the banks of the river Yarden. That's when they were ready at that moment to go over into Eretz Yisrael. And that's where we're holding the whole Sefer Devarim is a repetition, Kaviyohol, that Moshe Rabbeinu made them in Arvish Moyav, and he made it the whole repetition a short time. That was in Chodesh Shvat, and in Chodesh Nisan, at the beginning of Chodesh Nisan, the Yidden went over the Yarden in the Eretz HaKodesh Kidduah. They kept that Pesach already in Eretz Yisrael. That was the time when Moshe Rabbeinu repeated the Torah. However, prior to that, they reached at the end of the 42 journeys, and the Eibusha says, "Vayidava Hashem el Moshe ba'aravis moyo." Al Yarden Yerichoi leimoyo. They're on the banks of the Yarden, opposite. It's called Yarden Yerichoi because they could see Yerichoi. They were opposite the key to the whole of Eretz Yisrael. The Gemara says that Jericho, Yerichoi, that was Maftecho Shel Eretz Yisrael. It was the key of the whole of Eretz Yisrael. Once they got into Yericho, then they'd got into the majority of Eretz Yisrael. So they're sitting there on the banks of the Yarden. Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amat aleihem yatem uivrim es haYarden. You're going through the river Yarden Eretz Canaan into. Right now at the time, this is the second generation already. This is the generation that are going into Eretz Yisrael. V'hirashtem es kol yeshvei ha'oretz mipneichem. You must drive out all of the dwellers of the land in front of you. V'ibadatem es kol maskiyesam. You have to, of course, to be lost and destroyed, all their bowing down stones. V'es kol tzalmim asekeh, all their idols, tiabedu. V'es kol b'moisam, and all their altars where they offered up all their false offerings. Tashmidu, you have to destroy. And then it's written again, v'hirashtem es ha'oretz v'yishavtem bo. And you must drive out and empty out the land from all of its dwellers. V'yishavtem bo, and you must sit in it, you must dwell in it. Ki lochem nosate es ha'oretz lo reshes oisah. Because I've given to you, Yidden, this whole country, that you should conquer it, literally, reshes oisah, to take it over. However, we see that in this pasuk, in pasuk Nun Gimel, instead of just telling them that you have to rid the eretz of Avodah Zarah, the Moshe Rabbeinu adds that they have to drive out all the servers of the Avodah Zarah. They have to empty the land of its inhabitants, but they have to sit in it. Yishavtem bo. Why? Because I've given it to you as a. And then it's written in Nun Daled, v'yisnachaltem es ha'oretz b'goilu. You must divide up the eretz and give everybody their portion according to lots, as we saw in Pasha Pinchas. The whole way that they divided up the land, it was through lots and it was through Ruach HaKodesh. Rashi brings out there were three different factors in the dividing up of the land. However, we see that this pasuk is talking about two main inyonim: driving out by conquering, by war, driving out all the inhabitants, and sitting in Eretz Yisrael in a way that you'll divide it up and you'll give it and it'll become a nachalo, everlasting portion, and an inheritary portion to each and every family and every yid in Eretz Yisrael. And so that's the connection with the 3 weeks. It's well known that Davkin every year, whether it's a Shnas Ibur or whether it's an ordinary year, we read Pasha Maaseh in the Gimel Shavuot. It must come out Pasha Maaseh in the 3 weeks. Sometimes Pasha Pinchas comes out before the 3 weeks of Pasha Maaseh. And so it's brought down in the great Sfarim. Why is it that we see in Pasha Maaseh that not only we tell the journeys that every year has to go through to get to Eretz Teva Rechova, and we also give a mitzvah here that we're going to deal with tonight, a mitzvah of conquering and, as it were, living in Eretz Yisrael. And then we see the details of the borders of Eretz Yisrael also brought down in this Pasha at great length. What is the actual definitive bordering of Eretz HaKodesh, of Eretz Yisrael? And that's a mitzvah to divide up that Eretz Davki inside those boundaries, and it's a mitzvah to, as it were, adhere to those boundaries in the division of the dividing up of Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, Davki in those days, when we're as it were, remembering and we're being mamayit from our inyonim in this world, how to call lessening our hanoas and our pleasures in this world, for the sake of the remembrance of the period of the Churban Beis Hamikdash, the destruction of the temple. Dafki in those days, every year we read all these inyonim, but again to the kedusha and the conquering and the journeys and everything with connection to Eretz Yisrael. So it's a pellet. Let's say this al pi hashgacha pratis.
Where you can see, is there a way you can see the ins and out in the 40 masas, the 40 levels of Tumah?
Sorry, I can't hear.
You said about you said Karabais and Taiva, right? That's like the level of Tumah, right? Speak.
There's a place called Custom and Typist, which you said it has the eating of Tumah in it.
No.
What are the levels of Tumah?
No. Taiva means where you lust for something physically.
That's like one of the levels of
So
Tumah.
Kibbutz Taiva means that was a place where they buried all their Taivas.
He's asking if that was one of the levels of Tumah. Asking if that was one of the levels of Tumah.
No, it doesn't have to do with Tumah. It's got no shaykhs to Tumah. No. You mean the gateways of Tumah that they got out of when they left Mitzrayim? Well, yeah, I mean, in a general way one could say yes. But in a specific way, that's another. In the Memtes Shari Tumah, well, they're, very deep in Yonim, even worse than Taivas. The same kind of machim to go into that. All right. So, but I understand what you were aiming at with the question. Comes along Rashi. Now, Rashi says that you must drive out all the people from Israel. V'hirashtem es ha'oretz, says Rashi in Pasuk Nun Gimel, v'hirashtem oiso miyoishveya. You must empty it out or drive it out from all of its inhabitants, because v'yishavtem bo. Then you'll be able to sit in the land. Because v'yishavtem bo tuchlu lehiskayim bo. You'll be able to literally persevere, to say, continue to last in the country. Tukru liskayim bo. V'im lav, but if not, lo yisuchlu lehiskayim bo. But if you don't drive out all the inhabitants, then you won't be able to exist in the land in a restful way. And like we see, a little bit later in Pasuk Nun Hey, the Pasuk warns, and it says, if you don't drive them out, then what will happen? That those ones you leave behind, they will be like thorns, Rashi said over there. They'll be like things that stick in your eyes, and like thorns that stick in your flesh, that they will cause you trouble, endless trouble. In other words, if you leave any of the 7 nations that were then in Eretz Yisrael behind, it'll be a big tzara for the Jewish people, such a ainya. And therefore, Rashi says that the purpose of the mitzvah of driving them out is to give you the opportunity to hold out and to last and to live lastingly in Eretz Yisrael. Well, if he's there, kommt euch that the two inyanim of Hirashtem v'yeshavtem, according to Rashi, albeit connected, but they're not necessarily a mitzvah in their own right, they're only a practical necessity. First of all, you've got to drive out all the people, otherwise you won't be able to sit in it. And if you don't sit in it, if you don't be mishkayim in it, then that's not good. What's going to happen is the goyim will cause you trouble, and they'll eventually drive you back out again. And therefore, we see from that Rashi holds that these two inyonim are like necessities which are dependent one in the other, and they're not necessarily an absolute mitzvah b'nei atzmom, nor they're just like a necessary and an essential thing that you have to do in order to preserve your own living in Eretz Yisrael. In other words, that this is zikr that the Eibusher wants you to go to Eretz Yisrael, and he doesn't want to have trouble. He doesn't want you to have troubles after you already got there. He wants that you should be able to sit there and last there and be mishkayim sham. Why would he want you to be mishkayim sham? Because Eibusher is a good tata. If he gives you a present like a wonderful country like Eretz Yisrael, that he wants you to live there permanently. He's not giving it in order to be driven back out, or even to be in a matzav of chores from the people that they happen to be there. So Lefizeh, it would seem that Rashi holds that it's a practical matter. Driving out the goyim and sitting in Eretz Yisrael is all part of the divine promise that you'll have Eretz Yisrael and you'll sit in it. But what is the ultimate purpose of being in Eretz Yisrael? And what is the whole inyan there? The Rashi holds that these Pesukim are not necessarily dealing with that. They're not necessarily telling me what is the ultimate purpose of your being there. And so what is the ultimate purpose? We have to look at all sorts of different indications that we see. We have to assume that we're put in Eretz Yisrael in order to carry out Hashem's will, in order to build the Beis HaMikdash. Oid kama v'kama in Yonim, but that's got nothing to do with this statement and these mitzvahs which are given here in the Pasuk. Which Lefizeh, Afilu will say that they are a mitzvah, then we have to say that they're just like a mitzvah zmaniyah, so they call like a temporary thing that was given at that time, but not a permanent inyan. However, comes along the Ramban, and the Ramban here in his Pirush al Torah says very briefly what he brings at great length in another place, and that is that the Rambam wrote a thing called the Sefer Mitzvahs. You guys are familiar with that. You learn, I don't know what you guys learn, but whether you learn the Rambam, the three pocket of one period, the Sefer Mitzvahs, also put in the Sefer Mitzvahs from the Rambam. And the Ramban, who was a little bit later than the Rambam, he wrote a whole series of what you might call kashiyas on the Sefer Mitzvahs of the Rambam. Some of them are not necessarily kashiyas, some of them are like observations and at great length, but usually they're sort of differing opinions, but again to the mitzvahs or the counting of the mitzvahs. So the fascinating thing is, at the end of that whole work that he wrote on the Sefer Mitzvahs, the Ramban made a list of mitzvahs, what he claims that the Rambam forgot them. that he forgot them, and because of that, he put in other mitzvahs which are not really mitzvahs. It wasn't really necessary to put them in. And the Ramban is saying, but if it's left up to me, then I would put these mitzvahs in instead of the ones that he put in, which are not really necessary. It's a whole big this. So oddly enough, of great interest to us is that the fourth mitzvah that the Ramban says that the Rambam forgot is this mitzvah here, this passage here, exactly the psukim which we just read, didn't we? Exactly the psukim which we just read, and comes along the Ramban saying that Hoirashtem Esa Oretz Miyoshveya and Yishavtem Bo Odeya Mitzvahs Esim Mina Torah. They are called positive commandments from the Torah. And there's a mitzvah to drive out the Goyim from Eretz Yisrael. And al yidei you drive out the Goyim, then in a Haram you'll be able to sit in it. But he said that Yishavtem Bo is a mitzvah. That the Eibster tells me you've got to sit in Eretz Yisrael. And the Ramban says an amazing thing. And he says that mitzvah of driving out the Goyim from Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah which goes on all the time, in every generation, that we are commanded not to allow the land of Israel to ever fall in the hands of Goyim. That is what the Ramban. And he says we must not ever even leave or abandon any part of Eretz Yisrael, where if we've already been there, or for any reason we already happen to be there, then it's forbidden for us to leave it behind klal. How much more so to leave it behind in the sense that Goyim will happen. And he says that the two mitzvahs of driving out the Goyim and sitting in Eretz Yisrael are all one mitzvah. As he writes Baritas in his beer on the Sefer Mitzvahs of the Rambam. Over here he writes the same thing, but he writes this very much in one sentence. He just sums it up. Over there he writes a whole big Aritas of the Ramban. And the great Mephoshim said, well, wait a minute, you got two mitzvahs. You're saying that it's a mitzvah to destroy the goyim and never let the goyim have any place in Eretz Yisrael. Now you're saying that it's also a mitzvah to sit there, and to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. So, make up your mind. Have you got two mitzvahs or have you got one? So therefore they say that the Ramban holds that the Ikar mitzvah is to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. That is the Ikar. Because the driving out of the goyim is only like a physical necessity that you should be able to sit in Eretz Yisrael. But the dwelling in Eretz Yisrael is a positive commandment. The other Indian is like what you might call a mitzvah, which is part of the general mitzvah. So where do we find a thing like that? So there's a famous Ritva, but he was one of the great early period Rishonim. He was a Talmud of the Ramban. In fact, he calls the Ramban Rabbeinu HaGodel. He was a Talmud. So he writes that we could suggest that it's similar. There's a mitzvah brought down in Sefer Dvarim in a few weeks' time. The mitzvah of building a little fence. If you have a flat roof, then you must build a marquet. Like I've forgotten the word in English. You have to build like a rail and a fence. And the reason for that is that people shouldn't... Fence, yeah. That's not exactly... But anyway, to prevent people falling, chas v'sholem, that somebody would get close to the edge of the building, he shouldn't fall. So it's written, v'lo tosim domim b'veisel. You shouldn't put the possibility of bloodshed in your house. And that's a negative commandment. So says the Ritva that really that negative commandment is really part of the positive commandment. It's written that you must build ma'ikah around your house, and that is to prevent that people shouldn't fall. Because the pasuk says, "Shelo yipol haneifu mimenu," as they state in the pasuk, and then it immediately says, "V'lo yitosim domim b'vei secha." So says the Ritva, even though that we have to say that's another mitzvah, but it's really part of the mitzvah of Tzias Ma'akeh. And it's not a separate inyan. Therefore, even though it's negative and positive, here they're both positive. Even though negative and positive, each time as the Ritva that you only would reckon in the number of the mitzvahs, you'd only reckon one. Tainu Asiyas Ma'akeh. And the other one is Kil Tafel. Now, it's not what we call in other parts of the Gemara a mitzvah, lav hanitik la'esel, even though some people claim it is. There's certain negative commandments which are like part of positive commandments. Anyway, it's a big discussion. And then we find another Indian with the sending of the mother away. When you find a mother on her eggs, a mother bird sitting on her eggs, then it's written, she's got chickens when they come out of the eggs, then you're not allowed to take the mother and the eggs together. No, you have to send away the mother, and then you can take the small birds for yourself. Or when you actually take the birds, you must not have the mother present, you have to send the mother away. So that's called Shiruah Hakam. So there's a union from Shalach Tishalach Esaim, and then there's a union that not to take Loisikach Ha'im Alabanim. You shouldn't take it together with or take the banim together with the aim. So the Ritva writes over there the same thing. He says that really the Ikar mitzvah is you have to send away the mother. And Loisikach is just like an extra biur, and it's an extra explanation why there's a mitzvah of Lishalech as aim. He says the same thing with the Indian from Micah. So he wants to say that's what the Ramban wants over here, that the Ikar mitzvah is to sit in Eretz Yisrael. In order to do that, you're going to drive away the goyim, and if you don't, then they will cause you endless. They'll cause you endless trouble. And he said that goes on b'chol ha'teres u'b'kol ha'zmanim. The Ramban writes that even Bisman Hazeh, not only in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, but even Bisman Hazeh, there's a mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, and it's a mitzvah of HaTorah, and there's a sniff in that mitzvah to drive out Goyim from Eretz Yisrael and not to let them have any place in Eretz Yisrael, particularly if Rachmanin and Tlan, they're going to cause trouble. And you must do everything in your possibility to drive them זה כך כוסף במפורש in the Ramban. However, it would appear that Rashi doesn't hold that. Therefore, we find that there's all sorts of places, both in the Torah and particularly in his Pirush ala Gemara, that Rashi tends to indicate that he doesn't hold as a mitzvah min Torah to actually dwell in Eretz Yisrael. Rashi holds, for example, there's a very fascinating halacha. It's brought down in Masechta Gittin, what the Gemara says over there, that you're allowed to buy a house in Eretz Yisrael. Fil Shabbos, what do you mean to buy it? Not to pay the money, Cholila. But if you're frightened that somebody else is going to get it and you're not sure, you can ask a goy to write a shtar, to buy the land from a goy. You can ask another goy to write the shtar that you should be able to give the goy a shtar, what's called a shtar kinyan on Shabbat. That's a very rare thing because you're not allowed to ask a goy to do yourself a malacha on Shabbat. That itself is a isa, min haTorah or is a midrabanan. Different. It depends what the particular cases are. Over here, you're allowed to ask a goy lechatchila to do that for you. So the answer is, why can I do that? So the answer is, yishuv eretz. Well, it's a mitzvah to sit and to put Yidden sitting and living in Eretz Yisrael. Whether you're a Yidden, you want to buy a house, you're allowed to be oiva. Amir l'nochri, which is isa midrabanan on Shabbat, in order to make sure that you have your house in Eretz Yisrael. So Rashi in Masechta Gittin, where that halacha is brought down, Rashi doesn't say that it's a mitzvah mishum Eretz Yisrael to sit and dwell in Eretz Yisrael. And Rashi says that it's a mitzvah to drive away the goy afilu on Shabbat. The goy is only stopping. He shouldn't have a place in that. That's only stopping. That's the ikar. Although not that there's a mitzvah to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. Well, for that we see it's pretty clear. The Rashi holds that there's no real, maybe with the Rabbanan and certain not really to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. Well, they'll say, if there's a union to dwell in Eretz Yisrael, but we find it all over in the sages and the Kabbalah, it's the most unbelievable union to dwell in Eretz Yisrael. Rashi holds that those are ruchnistic inyanim. It's a great thing because of the mitzvahs that you can be makayim, the kedusha, the toid inyanim. Although there's no actual mitzvah sitting per se in Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, Rashi is very careful here not to make a mitzvah out of it. He just says you have to drive away the goyim in order to be able to live there. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to live there. And that's for sure that Hashem gave you a gift in order you should live there. So it comes along, there's a very famous case of this in Masechta Kesubas, right near the end, and Daf Kufyu, that's pretty close to the end of Masechta Kesubas. But a very famous Mishnah over there, what it's written that if a husband all of a sudden decides he wants to go and live in Eretz Yisrael, then he can force his wife, even though she says she doesn't want to go live in Eretz Yisrael, he can force his wife to go with him into Eretz Yisrael. And if she doesn't want to go, then he's allowed to divorce her. And he doesn't have to pay her kasuba or anything. She loses completely on the deal, as you might say. And he's allowed to, to sort of say, okay, bye-bye, and he's off to Eretz Yisrael. He stayed to it in the Mishnah. And it's written in the Mishnah the other way around. Tommy's wife says, Tommy's wife says she wants to go to Eretz Yisrael. And he says that he doesn't. Then, he has to divorce her, but he's got to give her a ksuba, and he's got to give her all her monetary rights that she do, and she can go to Eretz Yisrael, and he can be left behind. I state that in the actual text of the Mishnah. And then there's another din brought down in Masechta Gittin about an Eved. That's even more of a pillar. And it's called Eved Kanani, that he's got certain dinim of a Yisrael. He can say to his Rav that he wants to go to Eretz Yisrael. He wants to go and live in Eretz Yisrael. So the Rav has to go with him to Eretz Yisrael. Either that, or he has to, write him what's called a get shifru. He has to free him from being if he doesn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. And the Rambam brings that down. And the whole big shiloh, what does the Rambam hold? But maybe we won't get too involved in that. We'll mention this briefly shortly. But anyways, brought down these halachas l'poel that an Eved can actually have the right to be freed if he says that he wants to go to Eretz Yisrael. Well, but take if Aki Rav, he wants to go to, and he's not yet a complete Yid. He's not a complete, he's only mechuyev in all the mitzvahs leisaseh, but not in the mitzvahs. He's like Aisha. If he's there, we see that there's a very amazing power of wanting to go and live in Eretz Yisrael. So the shaila is mitzad Maaseh. And if I wrong before Shimon, that it's mitzad the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael. And if the person wants to go and he wants to live in Eretz Yisrael, it even blows his marriage if if his wife doesn't want to go with him. So comes along over there to Yisrael, and he brings down Rabbeinu Chaim. What he's known as Rabbeinu Chaim in the Balei HaTeisos, he's the Rabbeinu Chaim HaKoyen. He was a Koyen. Some people said maybe that's got a hashpah on the whole matter. But anyway, Rabbeinu Chaim says that nowadays this din is not noihig. He said that a lot is not noihig nowadays. And he's from with, he said, because to get to Eretz Yisrael is tremendous sakonas drachim. It's very, very, very dangerous and difficult to get to Eretz Yisrael. In the time, the time of the Balei HaTeisos, it's very, very hard to get to Eretz Yisrael. And even in the time of the Baal Shem Tov, everybody's familiar with the famous story of the Baal Shem Tov with the Erech Haim HaKodesh. Everybody's familiar. It's even not necessary to tell the story. Everybody's so familiar with it. The Erech Haim HaKodesh was his yota. It was just less than 2 weeks ago. The Erech Haim HaKodesh and the Baal Shem Tov, they had spiritual connections. Their polarizations that to pick one another up. And the Baal Shem Tov left Europe in order to go to Eretz Yisrael in order to meet the Erech Haim HaKodesh. And it's put down as for him, Kabbalah, that had they met, that Moshe would have had to come. It wouldn't have had any prayer. It would have been such an unbelievable, and there's a whole reason of Kabbalah, because the Baal Shem Tov was a certain inyan in the spirits of Atzilus, and the Erech Haim HaKodesh was a certain inyan. Had those two inyanim united together, then it would have been Meshachar, such an unbelievable revelation that it would have to be the Gula Mamish of Platz. And the Baal Shem Tov was aware of that. And there was these unbelievable tzoros that he had trying to get to Eretz Yisrael. Even in those days, it was very, very difficult. And eventually he got on the ship, after a lot of trouble, he got on the ship in Constantinople, whatever it's called. And he got into the ship there, and he started down towards Eretz Yisrael, and there was an unbelievable storm at the sea. There's never been such a storm, and the ship just thrown oil, and eventually it sank, and the Baal Shem Tov got into the water. Miraculously, he and a couple of his Talmudim that were with him, they got saved. They got up on the beach somewhere. It was only a few days before Pesach. They thought they were going to be Pesach in Eretz Yisrael. And they didn't have any matzahs, they didn't have any wine, a whole amazing mass. So in the end, the Baal Shem Tov decided not to go any further, because he saw that it was Min HaShamayim. It wasn't wanted that he should meet the Erech Haim HaKodesh. A whole big story. So we see that even generations later, after the Rabbeinu Chaim HaKohen, there was this tremendous difficulty to travel to Eretz Yisrael. It was very dangerous and difficult. So he says, because of the sakonas hadrachim, ein din zeh noyeg bezman hazeh, and then he writes even more, and he says, ve'achshav bezman hazeh, ein mitzvah lodu be'eretz Yisrael. This right to Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen. And he says, mipnei she'esham harbe mitzvahs v'oin shehem. There's many mitzvahs and the punishments that would hit you for not keeping those mitzvahs. She'ein anu yechilim. We can't possibly stand on them. It's so difficult. The matzav in Eretz Yisrael is so, difficult with the goyim, with the tzoros, with everything over there, that it's impossible. So we're just getting ourselves into a lot of trouble with all the mitzvahs. Eretz Yisrael, therefore, ein mitzvah lodu bisman hazeh Be'eretz Yisrael. Also he bringt the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen. He adds that that's like a second inyan, why it's not noyeg, this whole inyan bisman hazeh, that you can't force your husband or your wife to go to Eretz Yisrael. So I come along certain people and I say, what is that? This is pretty heavy going, just to sort of rule out the whole inyan. Ain't mitzvah a lot of Eretz Yisrael because of the difficulties. So you have to overcome the difficulties. Struggle hard, go to Eretz Yisrael, work very hard. Comes along the Marit, but the Marit was one of the early Achreinim, very early Achreinim, and his name was Rabbeinu Yontov or something or other. Anyway, he calls himself the Marit. He's got famous Shiloh's Tshuvas. He writes that he doesn't believe. Some of his people are very amazed at this. He writes he doesn't believe that Tosfos wrote that. He says that he believes that there was a lot of Talmidim in the Baalei HaTosfos that made Hagoyas in the Tosfos, and he said that he believes that there was a Talmud that the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen must have written that in, because he thought that he knew better than his Rav. He said, but this is it that the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen didn't write that in. And he said, Ein Devar Kazeh, and that it's still a mitzvah nowadays to go to Eretz Yisrael, and you can still force your wife. They said to Marit. So a lot of people come along and say, wait a minute, I mean, for generations upon generations, people have been learning this Tosfos, all of a sudden you say, no, it's not really a Talmud, mixed in Hebrew, it's not, the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen didn't really write it. So the plot thickens that later on, they found a tshuva from the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen. Yeah, they found a tshuva from him, and it's written over there that he holds that this din, forcing your wife to go to Eretz is not noyeg bisman hazeh. He writes, mipnei sakona satrochim. And he only mentioned because it's a sakona to go, although you can't force a woman. She doesn't want to take on herself a sakona, you can't force her. That's all he writes. So then we comes along the Marit, and the Marit, he found this tshuva, and he said, you see, he said the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen himself in a later thing, he didn't write it was because we can't keep the mitzvahs in Eretz Yisrael, there's no mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. He only said because of the sakonas hadrachim. And therefore some people want to say that that's for sure that the Rabbeinu Chaim Kohen changed his mind. He must have, in the latter years, he sort of, he left that out, and he always said because of the sakonas hadrachim. Or if the sakonas hadrachim were dropped out, then for sure it's a mitzvah lot of Eretz Yisrael. That's how some people, that's how they want to learn the whole Indian, when they get the Marit, and when they get the whole thing. Well, some people say that, that's pretty hard going to say a thing like that. Yesh pilpulim gedolim v'zev, what does Tosfos really hold? What Rabbeinu Tam hold? Other great Baalei HaTosfos. Upon him, there's a tremendous number of the great poskim that they hold that it is a mitzvah to live bisman hazeh in Eretz Yisrael. And the Ramban brings down and I mean right at the end of his long, yes. He brings right, I thought I put on a sefer from him. Right at the end of his long view on the Sefer Mitzvahs that the Ramban brings down a Sifri, but the Sifri is a medrash of our sages on Bamidbar Udvorim al derech halacha. It's more al derech halacha. It's not a medrash in Drush. And in the Sifri, that's written like that. And the Ramban brings it down, and he brings that once upon a time, Maaseh. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira was one of the very great Tanoim. But Rabbi Maaseh ben Choresh, that's brought down, he's brought down in Pirkei Avos. And you know about him, you know what happened with Rabbi Maaseh ben Choresh? You guys are not familiar with the story? You know the story. No, isn't it? You might tell the amazing thing. Rabbi Maaseh ben Choresh, he felt that it was hard for him to guard his eyes, and there was a whole mess of some immoral woman sort of came past, and he was tempted to look at her, the whole thing. So he took a fork and he popped his eyes out. That was amazing. Yeah. he popped his own eyes out. It's brought down in the Gemara that the Malachi Ashoret, that they said to the Eibishter, that is one of the greatest Torah scholars that we got in the world. He said, he doesn't have any eyes, how can that be? And so the Eibishter said, don't worry, and the Eibishter gave him back his sight. I don't know, he said, how it all works. His eyes got back in again, or he got new eyes. I don't know how that happened. But the Eibishter gave him back his sight. They state in the Gemara that because of the tremendous Mesiras Nefesh that he had, that the Eibishter made him an amazing net. Anyway, there's Rabbi Moshe ben Chorosh, and he was going together with Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira is mentioned in the Gemara and Seta Brachas also. Rabbi Hanania ben Achei Rabbi Yeshua. That's also interesting. Why is he called the son of the brother of Rabbi Yeshua? Anyway, Rabbi Hanina ben Achei Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yonasan. Shehoyu Yoitzim l'chutz la'oret. They were going, for some reason, they were going out of Eretz Yisrael to Chutz la'oret. V'higir l'paltum, they came to some place just over the border. It was like a big city outside Eretz Yisrael. V'zochru is Eretz Yisrael. All of a sudden they remembered that they'd gone outside Eretz Yisrael, and all of a sudden they thought, wow, we're outside of Eretz Yisrael. V'zochru einayim, they lifted up their eyes. V'zolgu dimoiseihen, and all their tears started running down, all of them together, all down their faces. V'koru bigayim, they tore their clothes like they were in Avelas. V'koru hamikra hazeh, v'yirashtu eisah, v'yishavte ba'atzo. That's another pasuk in Devarim, that you must drive out the goyim and you must sit in there. Derech Agav, the Orach HaKodesh, it's very interesting, we mentioned him before, the Orach HaKodesh. The Orach HaKodesh, he writes over here that the pshat of the pasuk is according to Rashi. That's what he said. He said that the pshat of the pasuk over here is much more according to Rashi than the Ramban. That's what he writes. Over there, in this pasuk, the Orach HaKodesh says that from here it's a mitzvah, lo do v'lo some people say, well, you can't have a cake and eat it too. Over there, the pshat is called the Rashi and eat it. So this is two different inyanim. The Rashi in the pshat of the pasuk, or in the halacha l'maaseh, and from other pasukim it could be all differently. Also, the Orach HaKodesh also brings us as a raya the mitzvah to sit in Eretz Yisrael. So what did they do? As soon as they judged, and they said, Omru. Where are we? B'chazru b'hem. And they went back immediately. They decided not to go any further. They went back immediately. V'omru yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, the dwelling in Eretz Yisrael, shekula keneged kol hamitzvah shabbatayra. It's equal, how do you call it, if you put it in a weighing thing. Yeah, and sitting in Eretz Yisrael, and all the mitzvahs in the Torah, and you weigh them up, one against the other, then they would be equal. In other words, they were so certain that sitting in Eretz Yisrael is a mitzvah, they said it's shekula keneged kol mitzvah. I mean, that's pretty amazing going. And then another story, Maaseh. Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, unbelievable great. I mean, he was a makubo of Rabbi Yochanan. Shahoyu oilchim b'nitzivin ate Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. They were looking for Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira. They wanted to go. They were later than him. They wanted to go and learn with him. Lilmei dimanu Torah. But Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, he lived in a place called Sidon. You know what Sidon? That's up in Lebanon. And so the border of Eretz Yisrael goes all the way up to where, I don't know if the present day Sidon is the same Sidon, but it goes all the way up there. But if you get in the certain part of Sidon, then you're already outside the border of Eretz Yisrael. So that's where B'diuk Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira was at that time. What he was doing over there, he just said that he couldn't possibly leave Eretz Yisrael. What's he doing over there? I don't know. He can't have everything in one go. Anyway, all of a sudden they said exactly the same thing. They said, Kaval was left there at Yisrael, and they wept, the tears ran down their faces, and they tore their clothes, and they went back and they said to Pasik, V'yishavtem ba'arzo, and they chazur lehem, even though they were going to learn Torah. They went back. Yeah, and they said, ישיבה סרצו שקולה כנגד כל המצוות שבתורה. So the Ramban says, there you got it. It's a mitzvah, not only is it a mitzvah, but it's equal to all the other mitzvahs. So that's how he finishes it. That's how he rounds off his whole argument. So come along some people and they say, you know, wait a minute, you know, therefore they want to say that maybe the pshat is that not shkula connected, that that's a zam mitzvah, that it outrides all the other mitzvahs. No, that's a zam mitzvah, that if you carry out that mitzvah, then you'll be involved in all the other mitzvahs. In other words, that maybe it's not mamish mitzvah say, to sit in Eretz Yisrael per se, but if you do sit in Eretz Yisrael, then you open up the gateway to all the other mitzvahs. And through that you gain the unbelievable ability to keep all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Because there's a lot of mitzvahs in the Torah, a large majority of them, which are dependent in Eretz Yisrael. And if maybe that they didn't actually mean that was a mitzvah sesame in the Torah, and it's shokul connected kol shari mitzvah, but it's b'vadai a mitzvah. It's a dover toiv and a dover what a Kodesh Baruch Hu would want it. But who says that? Until there's a whole big discussion opens around, and many opinions are expressed when they get to this whole inyan, and it gets down to an amazing thing that we see that Avraham Avinu was told by the Eibush to come to Eretz Yisrael. Lech lecho la'atzah. Yeah, lech lecho. Ela oretz asher, Eretz Yisrael. Shortly after, in Eretz Yisrael, what did he do, Avraham Avinu? Oh, yeah, there was a famine. What did he do, Avraham Avinu? He went down to Eretz Mitzrayim. So comes along Rashi says that, why did he do that? Rashi said he did the right thing. It's a famine, and in order to save yourself, then that's what you have to do. Comes along the Ramban, and the Ramban says, oh no, he said that was very good, that was a big, and he writes the Ramban was a big fault in Avraham Avinu, very amazing. People's eyes jump out when they see that the Ramban says the thing like that. He said because he was commanded to go to Eretz Yisrael by the Eibush. Well, you can't, once you're in Eretz Yisrael, you can't just go down. I was a famine. I thought a famine was like Pikuach Nevet. So some of the great Meforshim, they bring. Yeah, you guys are familiar with the story of Ruth. You know, on Shavuos, you read the story of Ruth. So right at the beginning, it's written that Elimelech and his sons, they left Eretz Yisrael and they went out to live in the fields of Moab. They died over there. And Naomi was left on her own. She was the wife of Elimelech. So Rashi brings over there, why did they die in Eretz Moab? He said because they left Eretz Yisrael and they went to Chutz La'aretz. Rashi, he doesn't hold that story. It's a mitzvah. Rashi said they shouldn't have left Eretz Yisrael. Because they did, and they were punished. So it comes along, there's a Gemara in Masechta Bava Basra, and there's a very famous Rashbam. And the Rashbam says, why is it if you're already in Eretz Yisrael, that you're not allowed to leave? You must leave it, so if you're already there, I'll show you guys, you've had it. It says, the Rashbam, if you're already in Eretz Yisrael, you're not allowed to leave. He says, Shemafkia es atzmei min ha-mitzvahs. It's a new idea. The Rashbam says, if you're in Eretz Yisrael, you can keep all sorts of mitzvahs. If you leave Eretz Yisrael, it's like you're saying, oh, I got too many mitzvahs sitting on my shoulder. I'd like to sort of throw a few of them off, you know. Let's sort of make it a bit easier in life. Mafkia es atzmei min ha-mitzvahs. And if I could tell you that according to the Rashbam, maybe even Rashi would agree with that the reason that Elimelech, so anybody who lives that soil, he should be, he should die like Elimelech did. And they say no, because Elimelech, the Gemara says over there that he was Parnas Hador, he was the leader of the generation. And he was like the dogma that everybody looked at. And his sons also were very important people. And if you're a very important and leading figure, and you leave Eretz Yisrael. It was a famine. A famine meant can't do the so therefore the Gemara says over there these two opinions, and it says that the price of a bit of wheat, that he called a seller, that he called a swah of wheat, it's got to be some huge amount of money. Then you can think about leaving Eretz Yisrael. Comes along Reb Natan, I think it's Reb Natan, Tana. It's one of the Amoraim. And he says, no, even if it's worth double than that, even if it costs double, you still shouldn't leave. So you'd need to be a big rich man to keep living in such a situation. So therefore they want to come up with a new idea, and this is what the Rambam brings. And that's why the Rambam becomes a bit mystifying. The Rambam says that even if there's a terrible famine in Eretz Yisrael, he says, Midas Hasidusu Loi Lazev Yisrael. The Rambam says it's a pious midah not to leave. He doesn't say that if you leave, you're doing, you're being mevatel the halacha, but he said it's a pious thing not to leave. And so obviously he's basing himself on that extra opinion in the Gemara, which said even if it's an impossible price, right, he shouldn't leave. What, in that case, how would he say that you can leave? Only if there was mamish nothing to eat, peep shutei. That there was mamish nothing to eat, absolute. They'd be able to maybe leave. But just because of famine, it's a midas not to leave Eretz. So here we see a new idea, not to leave Eretz. Now, the Ramban writes, not to leave Eretz because you got a mitzvah to live in Eretz. If you leave just being mevatel that mitzvah, apart from the fact that you're missing out on other mitzvahs. Yo. Wait a minute, my child. Take it easy. So according to the Ramban, it's a simple equation. You can't leave Eretz Yisrael. I got a better one than figure to go about my sleep, my child. I felt a shaila. What's going on around here? How do people come to Eretz Yisrael and never leave? The Ramban says if you come to Eretz Yisrael, you can't leave because there's a mitzvah of yeshivas Eretz Yisrael, and that mitzvah, when are you mechuyev in that mitzvah? If you're sitting in a suburb of Philadelphia or something, you're not mechuyev. Or if you end up in Eretz Yisrael, then you become mechuyev in that mitzvah. Is that the Ramban? And it's a mitzvah b'chol hadoirot min haTorah to live in Eretz Yisrael. The amazing thing is, you won't believe this. The amazing thing is that the Ramban himself actually came to Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban himself, and he lived in a very difficult time in Jewish history. The Ramban lived in Spain, but he lived during the time that the terrible massacres were going on in Europe. What he called the Crusades, the Maaseh that they were going on, and the Ramban, he lived for a very, very tremendous, difficult period in Jewish history. Somehow or another, the Ramban got across to Eretz Yisrael, and he actually visited the Koisel. He was actually where, in those days it was terrible. He did to get to the Koisel, and it was all covered, almost buried under all the rubble and everything that they'd thrown there with the guns of Matos. Nonetheless, the Ramban actually made it, and he was in Eretz Yisrael for a few weeks, and then he left, and he went back to where he was. So everybody says, how come the Ramban did that? He's the one that says it. And he's so strict, the Ramban. He's so powerful. It's a mitzvah, so I said, the whole thing, nonetheless he went back. So now, having put that one down, then we can bring your thing, that the Frierdiker Rebbe came, and he was here, and he left after a few weeks. The Frierdiker Rebbe was at this time of the year, he was here in late Tammuz and early Ov. He was here during the 9 days. He was here Tisha B'Av. And he said, Moitza Tisha B'Av, he said a maimah to the Bochrim and Tom Fitzmin, the Frierdiker Rebbe. And he was actually, he travelled around the Friedrich, around amazing places while he was here. It's just unbelievable. He was in Sfaz. He was even in what's now Bnei Brak. He was actually Bnei Brak, yeah. It had already been founded, a little winny farming village called Bnei Brak. And the Rebbe went through and he stopped it. He asked him to stop the train, and he got out and he spoke to the farmers there. Friedrich Rebbe. Auch upon him, I saw the Shara on Friedrich Rebbe. How come he went back? The Ramban and other people hold it, you know. You shouldn't just leave, particularly that the Rashbam holds that once you're here, you get mechuyev in the mitzvahs. If you leave, you throw off those mitzvahs. And the whole Maaseh with Elimelech, and the Ramban was for sure an important personality, So there were several very amazing yechidus, and the people had with various personalities with the Rebbe Melech HaMashiach, and they put the question to the Rebbe, why doesn't he come to Eretz HaKodesh? There was a dover that was mafli, a lot of people. Why didn't he come, at least for a visit, that time? The Rebbe never left. He never left Crown Heights. All the years of his Nasir. He went once or twice to the camps. And then one day there was a hold up with the traffic, and the Rebbe never went anymore, even to the camp. There was a big hold up in the tunnel. It was in the tunnel, it was going through the tunnel. Huh? Tavis? The car broke down. I thought he was held up in the tunnel. I see. Anyway, whatever, there was a hold up, and the Rebbe was disturbed with his whole Seder, with his time. After the Rebbe never went anymore. Even though it was a big mitzvah to visit the camp, so the Rebbe never went anymore. I'll hope on him. People asked the Rebbe, why doesn't he come? So there were some times when the Rebbe obviously dodged the question. He sort of avoided it. He didn't commit himself to anything. There were other times when the Rebbe did say, and the Rebbe said clearly that there's a big question in halacha that if you mamish reach Eretz Yisrael, there's a big question in halacha as to whether you can leave. And the Rebbe quoted the Ramban, and he quoted other sources saying that they hold that you get involved not only in the mitzvah of the issue of Eretz Yisrael, but to feed the Rashbam, you get immediately visited with all the other mitzvahs upon you, and you can't just throw that off, you can't just leave. You can't just be mevatel the mitzvah for issue of Eretz Yisrael, the Rambam, and other great places. Better Kilu, the Rebbe said, on that basis, he doesn't want to let himself into such a tremendous suffering. So somebody, I'd appreciate it if you have some sort of schmeichling rapport with somebody on the other side, that you stop it, okay? Somebody said to the Rebbe, but your father-in-law, went to Eretz and he left. So the Rebbe smiled, and he said, my father-in-law had very broad shoulders. And he said, I don't have the same broad shoulders that my shver had, In other words, my father-in-law, he could get into such a sofek, and he was able to know the ways out of it. But I'm not as powerful as that, therefore I don't want to get into the sofek. That's what the Rebbe said to one person. However, there were all sorts of different nuances and answers that the Rebbe gave. There's another answer that the Rebbe gave, that he sees himself like the captain on a sinking ship. That the whole American Jewry is like a sinking ship. And that the last person to leave is the captain. The captain mustn't leave when the last person that leaves is the captain. In America, he can't leave. His presence in America is so beneficial to the whole ruchnius of America that he can't possibly leave. That's what the Rebbe told another person. So there are different inyonim there. However, we see that answer, that there's other inyonim here, apart from the greatness and the unbelievable kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. Even though we didn't really go into the kedusha of Eretz Yisrael, that's a more ruchnistic inyon, we only just bordered on that in our discussion. But we could say that a great person, for example, like the Friedrich Rebbe, and for that matter, the Ramban, We have to realize that the Ramban lived, as I said, at a most terrible time in Jewish history. And if we look just a little brief amount that I know about the lifetime of the Ramban and what he went through, if you look, there were thousands and thousands and thousands of Yidden and other great Torah scholars that they became the leaders of Torah and of everything after the passing of the Ramban. They referred to the Ramban as Rabbeinu HaGodel, and they themselves were great, great authorities, great poskim, the Ran and the Ritva and the Rashba Fila, that they and the Rosh and others, they were all tremendously stirred by the Ramban and his whole approach. So therefore, it contrasted the Ramban like held together the whole Goylo which was left after the terrible destruction of the Crusade. Unbelievable. I mean, I think in a way it's maybe even more terrible, or at least equally terrible, as the Shoah. The whole Crusade business was just unthinkable. It was just, it's just mind-boggling in its horrificness. I mean, you just can't figure what a terrible thing it was. Imagine the Ramban being in a place where that wasn't happening. But Poyo, and with his unbelievable greatness, he was like holding together the whole Indian of the Goylo. And under those circumstances, his personality and his status as a leader of Yidden is like a form of Pikuach Nefesh, like the whole, and that's Kilo overweighs the greatness of his keeping the mitzvah of living in Eretz Yisrael, and even his being responsible for the mitzvahs which are mutal upon you once you come to Eretz Yisrael. In other words, that those inyonim, as it were, become batel, the unbelievable leadership and the unbelievable centralness of his leadership in the whole Geilah. Isn't that? However, we should say that the same thing with the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe, you have to realize that when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, you could say, who knew the Frierdiker Rebbe in America? In those days, there wasn't all these faxes and all these mazes and emails and internets and all the crazy mazes that go on nowadays. In those days, just everything went by post, letters. There was a little bit of telephone, but who spoke internationally? But probably a place like Russia or anything. I mean, who knew what was going on? And nonetheless, when the Frierdiker Rebbe reached America, it was one of the biggest welcomes that was given to any single person that reached America. It was have you ever seen that old video of it? All these people who were moving very fast, the way the old videos move, there's a video of it. Have you ever seen it? It's mind-boggling. All these thousands of people running around to meet the Frierdiker Rebbe. In other words, that the image of the Frierdiker Rebbe was like a koyach, it was like a, how would you call it, a beacon and a mount, what's the expression, a migdal, a tower of power and of inspiration that held together all the Yidden in the Golas in America and in other places after the whole terrible things that Yidden had lived through. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was in America, b'shas the Shoya, and Yesh Level, he kept all the Yidden together, and his koyach, even though it didn't stop the Shoya, but it made it possible to rebuild very swiftly and gather together all the tremendous. And the same with the Kloisenberger, he did a tremendous work in that regard, as is one on in Europe itself. I mean, a great leader like that, when he comes to Eretz Yisrael, then he's able to, and therefore the Rebbe with his unbelievable modesty, that's what the Rebbe meant. He said that my Shver breite plate. In other words, he had very broad shoulders, meaning that he was carrying the whole Klal Yisrael on his shoulders. And therefore it was possible and understandable why he left Eretz HaKodesh. You can't just leave Eretz HaKodesh. And therefore the Rebbe, in his great modesty, the Rebbe said, I don't know if I go there, if I'm going to have that status. I'm not sure if I will have that status. And therefore I'll be, as it were, in inverted commas, ordinary Yid. Ordinary Yid's going to take into account the Ramban, he's going to take into account all this, the Rashbam and all the others. Once you're there, you can't just leave Eretz Yisrael. And therefore I remember in the old days,
Doesn't everything Rebbe say about the Friedrich Rebbe, he's talking about himself?
Yeah, to a certain extent that's true, but not in every case. You understand? I'll be right. I didn't mean to cancel that out. I just meant to introduce another nuance here. We see that these inyonim are. What was I about to say? I'll start off on some talk.
You're saying about the olden days.
Oh yeah, in the old days, it's okay. You can ask questions. In the old days, the people who said they used to write the Rebbe, they want to come and visit the Rebbe. I know many people. I know people here in Eretz Yisrael that they got answers from the Rebbe. You have to ask a rov. You have to be mavarer if you're allowed to come and leave Eretz Yisrael. Even though they knew the Rebbe knew they were coming to him, and they were coming to visit him for a visit. The Rebbe said, you must ask first if you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. On many occasions, people got that answer from the Rebbe, that you must ask first of all a rov. And then there were many cases where people wrote the Rebbe that they want to visit, America, they want to visit. And the Rebbe said, Yesh levarer, v'lishel, eitzel rav moira heroa, Haim Zemuta Ubezen time, if it's visible and under what condition, etc. Yeah. So, the Rambam brings down, based on the Gemara Masechet Kesubos, that you can leave for the sake of learning Torah. And that's what the big pillar about this whole story is. You can leave for the sake of learning Torah, and if you need badly to find a wife, and to find a profeshidduch, and you can't find an Eretz, then it's permitted to for that necessity to leave. But it's brought down that you must leave al manas lachzor. You must leave with the intention of coming back, even where you're permitted to leave. I mean, it's an amazing inyan. It's really a dvar pele. And ad kedi kach, the Ramban writes in Pasha Achrei, in Pasha Vayikra, the Ramban writes that all the mitzvahs in the Torah are really given for the sake of Eretz Yisrael. And all the mitzvahs which are done in Chutz La'aretz are only just to remember the mitzvahs, so when we come back to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach, we'll remember the mitzvahs, we'll know what we have to do. But all the mitzvahs are really only meant for Eretz Yisrael. And the whole Torah was be'ikah given for Eretz Yisrael. Ad kedikah. This right, the Ramban. So the Ramban is an amazing Eretz Yisraelnik. Everything in the Ramban's Torah centers around the whole universe. It's absolutely amazing. It's an absolute pele. And he writes that you must not allow. So, I mean, everybody's already got the message. I don't need to, I promise you, you're going to go away early tonight, and I'm going to keep my promise. Therefore, I don't need to go into the whole arichas, that you already got the point that according to the shit of the Ramban, I mean, me alone got the Ramban, you're not allowed to let goyim into Eretz Yisrael. And you're not allowed to let them in a way that you have to drive them out. Not just pass a law or something that they shouldn't come in. You've got your chuyu to drive them out. Alachas kama v'chama v'benoi shal kal v'chayim. That if there's a sakona b'dover, b'vadai you're allowed to let them in. Here the Ramban is allowed to let them in just down. Because that's the inyan of mitzvahs. Yishuv Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael is bound up with the mitzvah of driving out the goy. It's all one mitzvah. Where there's a sakana b'dover and its borders on the inyan of pikuach nefesh, or it's pikuach nefesh mamish, then ain't sovik b'dover. I feel according to Rashi, I feel according to anybody, ain't with the shum sovik. Like the Alter Rebbe brings in Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Pikuach Nefesh, the Alter Rebbe says that you must never allow a situation shetei hei ha'oretz neicho lehikabesh lifneim. You must never allow a situation where it'll be easy for the goyim to conquer the whole land. And that doesn't necessarily mean Eretz Yisrael. It means any place where yidna afilu b'chutz. At least state klor. Amamela. We see the great pillar that in our days, in our age, Dafka the Yidden, that they have the message of the Torah, and they should be the leaders of the opinion of the Torah, keep quiet about this whole issue. And I've deliberately picked up the so-called Haredi press. You know what they call it? The papers are given out by the Fruma Yidden here in Eretz Yisrael. There's a lot of them. And I've looked carefully to see if anybody says about the terrible sakona which is gradually growing over Eretz Yisrael, because behind the scenes they're selling away the whole country. They've already got all the agreement of the Palestinian state. That's already agreed on all that's going to be. They're going to give away all of Yerushalayim Atika and the whole thing. So they claim at the beginning it's not going to be given away. It's only going to be in the hands of an international force. So everybody knows what that means. I mean, that is even worse than the Arabic Kipshute. So the match was really absolutely terrible. Nobody talks about it. Absolutely. Did you hear anybody really making a whole rash about it? Even in Chabad? Well, you know the famous story with the Chassid. He came to the Rebbe Rashab, and he said that he's opened a new business, and the business is not going easy, and he's putting all his koyches in the business, but he still doesn't seem to be making enough parnasa, and he wants a bracha. So the Rebbe Rashab said to him, by the way, you didn't tell me what is the business, what do you actually make, what are you doing? He said, Rebbe, ich mach galoshen. But galoshes, you know, those things that fit over, you put, in Europe they're very popular, you put them over your shoes. Rubbers. How do you call them? Rubbers, yeah. In modern Hebrew they're called erdaloyim, Yeah. But they're called in Yiddish galoshen. So the Rebbe Rashab said, Meili, he said, Fies in galoshen habe ich gehört. He said, aber a Kopf in Galoshen? He said, that I never heard. He said, I've heard of feet inside Galoshen. He said, but a head inside Galoshen? He said, that I never heard. So you got to understand the mind. What he meant was that you put your head inside those Galoshen. That's why it's not you've got to get your head outside the Galoshen. You've got to have your head in the Torah and another in on him, and then the rest of the business will go good. The whole trouble is nowadays they've all got their heads in the galoshen. They're all thinking about the money and the manners, isn't it? Their heads are in the galoshen. Come on in, son. We've got to realize that we have a tremendous responsibility that we did hear from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe did tell us these, and in this class, being as it is in the Gimsha boys, I've tried just to give a background of just how the great Poskim and the great, particularly the Rambam, even the Rambam, according to sort of the great Achronim, the Rambam for sure holds that there is a mitzvah, but he sort of doesn't paskin that it's a mitzvah. Not there. Oh, big people in the Rambam, but everybody holds is that Cholila v'chas to give away Eretz Yisrael, even to leave Eretz Yisrael for a moment. Yesterday was the outside of the Ramak. You people heard the Ramak. You heard the Rabbeinu Moshe Karavira. Yesterday was his outside. He's buried right alongside the Arizal. I'm just going to make one brief quote from the Ramak, and then Beis Hashem will open it. There's a sefer in the Ramak called the Er Haner Rav. It's amazing. The Ramak wrote big Sforim, the Pardes, and all sorts of other Sforim. But he also wrote small Sforim. He wrote for him a sefer about Midas Tevis, about looking after your Midas, called Tema Devorah. Have you ever heard of it? A sefer called that. Very famous. And then he wrote a sefer called Er Tzach, very short sefer about Kabbalah. And then he wrote a sefer called Er Ner Rav, the sweet oil, how do you call it, the sweetened light. And in the Er Ner Rav, he writes over there the Ramak, an amazing thing. And he says that the Torah is like the heart of the whole creation. That the Eibush looked in the Torah and created the life force of every inyan in the creation is pumped into the veins of the creation by the Torah. And therefore, Cholila, the Torah wouldn't be for one moment, there's no word. Absolute. He's right to the Ramak, and he says that just like the Torah is the heart of the whole creation, Eretz Yisrael and the Torah are the heart of the whole, as it were, physical world down here in this world. And he says that where is the Torah in Eretz Yisrael? He said the shleimus of the whole Torah is in Eretz Yisrael. And he's like there's certain limbs in the body which have important things, and then there are other limbs in the body but they just give the whole life force to everything. And he said even more in a way than the brain, and that's Oishkal now picks this also. The heart is like the thing that pumps the blood, it keeps the whole metabolism, so the thing, everything is dependent in the heart. So he said that Eretz Yisrael is the heart the Torah, and it's the heart of the whole creation, it's the heart of the whole Yiddishkeit, is Dafke Eretz Yisrael. They bring the Ramah. And therefore he says that it's a tremendous mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael. They say you link up with the heart of the whole creation. And so according to the Ramah, it's a tremendous spiritual union to be in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, even if we hold that it's not mamish a mitzvah doiraisa in the 613, or nonetheless a mitzvah als a inim pnimi v'atzmi, to be in that unbelievable kedusha and to be part of the centrality of the whole Torah, or ein Torah ketorah Eretz based on that. Amamera, Hashem should help us. There will be zeicher, and it's one on Mashiach is going to appear in Eretz Yisrael, even though he's going to appear close to 770 first, they state in the famous statement, whatever, and then together with 770 he'll come over, and he's what you might call Kabbalah's punishment by the whole Jewish people will be in Eretz Yisrael. And interestingly enough, it's connected with Tiberia. That he's going to appear in the Galil, in the north part of the country, and he's going to go straight across to Tiberia, because that's where the Sanhedrin, the last point before it was unfortunately dispersed, the Sanhedrin was in Tiberia. So the Rambam's going to, the Rambam even says that Melech HaMashiach is going to be greeted by the reinstated Sanhedrin in Tiberia, and then after that he's going to come down Varovam to Yerushalayim and all that, which means you guys are going right up into the whole weekend. You guys are going right up into that area where Mashiach is going to be revealed in the Galil. In the Galil, and you're not far from Tiberia. I don't know if you're going to actually be draying anywhere near Tiberia during your itinerary. Also, when you're going to be in that area, therefore you must say very carefully each time you move around. You have to say, Eivishter, we want Moshiach now. And you have to say, Eivishter, Yechia Melech HaMashiach. And if that doesn't work, then you have to say, Eivishter Ad Mosai. But hopefully it'll work a long time before you get that far. And take it from Miyad Mamish, we'll all be together with the Rebbe and with the Guru Slave.
Amen. Kriya